So the question is that the mile of the Beis Hamikdash over the rest of the world is because of the Beis Hamikdash, not the actual ground. The ground itself, the place itself, like every other part of the world, is created with Asara Mamoris, in the words of the Zohar, Milin Dedyoita, common words, as opposed to divine words or Torah words. Of course, it's all divine, but the revelation of Hashem to create the output, what Hashem reveals to create, the Zohar calls common words, and the Lashon HaZohar is it's not the way of the king to use common parlance. The king has a whole different language. Where is that expressed in Torah? At any rate, so the question is, the place of the Beis Hamikdash is brought into existence as part of creation. And yet, Yaakov said, when he woke from his dream, and there's no Beis Hamikdash, of course, he said, this place is not Asar Hedjed, not an ordinary place. And how is that? What makes it special is the fact that Beis Hamikdash was built, the divine presence was manifest. So the Nakud of the answer, which the Maimon now is going to elaborate upon, is, let's just get again the outline, the as we call it. This is not so much geography, a little bit, levels. And that is, in Tanya we learn how does creation work? Creation works through Hashem expressing himself in two ways. Or the two dimensions, or two forces, as it were, emanating all from him, obviously, and all one at its core, but not from our perception. In our perception, there are two contrasting revelations, and that is, the Yisavos is from Shem Havaya, which is infinite Blikvul. But if the Yisavos would be only from Shem Havaya, then the world would be totally nullified. There would be a creation, but we would not feel any sense of independence, which is not what he desires. And therefore, he creates B'Poel. B'Poel means, what is it that we get, feel, relate to? Shem Elikim. That's B'chlal. What's the chiddush of the Mokim at Beis Hamikdash to be explained? Let's just get the outline. There, Shem Elikim was not master. Didn't conceal. Of course, Shem Elikim, but didn't conceal. There, Yaakov is saying, is in the irrigation, the last words of the Ois, of the second paragraph of chapter Dalet, Nirgesh begilo Yisavos k'Moishe Mishem Havai. There is felt creation like it is from Shem Havaya, notwithstanding the Poel to Shem Elikim. Beautiful words. What does this mean? So he began to explain that. Let's begin again. Yeah. So if you have the Sefer Shin Yutes, bottom of the page, third paragraph, Eis Dalet. Vinyan ho Yisabas Mishem Elikim b'derech hislapshus. So Yisabas Mishem Elikim, what does this word hislapshus mean? It's two words we're going to say. We've got a contrast here. B'derech memele b'derech hislapshus. Invested or not invested. There's a result, the result happens, but it's not as a result of an involvement. Another word we use, investor involvement. As opposed to B'derech Memela, it's a consequence, but the cause is not involved in producing the consequence. It just happens. Obviously, the motion for that is Oyer Moyer. The luminary doesn't have to labor to produce the light. A luminary naturally produces light. You see later Mishalim in the Maimon itself and in the Ha'aras, just looking ahead. So let's see. Then he brings the pasuk, which we noted seems to be like a raya. Bereish is baralikim. I think, actually, Now that the question was raised, the diak is bora, creates. The word creates implies involvement, investment. That may be the answer. As opposed to the pasuk he's going to bring. Yiheye, he said, and it happened. It's one pasuk. Yeah, that's the diak. The diak is the word bora, right? That's the answer to your question. Thanks for asking it, because that's the point. You see that it push it in parlance in the, someone talk about someone's creativity. We're talking about their investure and their talent that you can see within the art. If that's a or not, I don't know, but al kaponim, that's the implication of involvement. That is tzad Sabbath Mishem Havaya, creation Mishem Havaya, both from the derech and melech. Not involvement, not investure, but as a immediate consequence. As the pasuk says, Yahalulu Shem Havaya. It's a different pasuk. Praise the name of Havaya, that's the diuk. Kotziva v'nivro, he commanded and creation happened. Not bara, but tziva. Now, to understand the difference and what this means, the difference between these two productions, so things that are produced. Namely, whether the creation produced happens as a consequence, an immediate consequence, it's almost as if to the creator, there's no difference if there is creation or not. Which by that I mean, the creator means unaffected by creation, and that's what he's going to explain. Unaffected. Or b'derech hislapshus means that the cause is affected by the consequence and is present in the consequence. Let's see. So the difference is the difference is in the relationship between that which is produced to the source that produces it. To explain, when it's close, it's somewhat paradoxical, like all truth. When what is produced is right up close, right there. By right there we mean in the world of the Mahav, not another world, in the world of the Mahav. His havus b'derech hamela. The havus is natural. Again, the moed, it's going to say in a moment, the moed, the luminary produces light, and the light is me'ena moed, right there in the world of the moed. In fact, the light reveals the moed, and moreover, the light reveals the moed in an uncompromised way. Light reveals the source. Again, we've suggested here in our shiurim, I think I told you once that there are others that argue with what I'm saying. Rabbi notably is a respected mashpia who understands Oid and Moed, the pashtus, as it's written, a luminary, a light bulb, or a sun that produces light. But I'm suggesting, and I've discussed this with others, and it seems to be clear in many ways. By Oid and Moed, we don't just mean a light and a Moed, a light emanating from a light source, like the sun or a light bulb. We mean anything you see, because light is bouncing off it, whether it's the source of it or it's reflecting. What you see of that thing, that's the Oid. That's Oid. And the Moed is what you're looking at. And the Oid is Meina Moed. The Oid, light, faithfully conveys what it's bouncing off. Again, the camera, the eye. You're looking at something that is there, but how do you see it? It's much easier to understand with a camera, as we're just used to seeing. So, of course, you see. But think about the camera, little box here, you click it, there's a mountain there. How does it get here? Because light is traveling, bouncing off the mountain, and faithfully rendering the image of that which it bounces off. That's Erdemin Amoy. At any rate, so there the Ishabus says, but that it's close. It's Bekir of Lamahava, which means that the image that you have, the light, that this is Bekir of this is the source that it's expressing. And it's B'derech HaMelech. There's no effort. There's no effort. It's not like there is a by effort we mean a decision to be engaged in something. It's just you are what you are, and this is what it produces. This is like a person having an effect on the environment just by being the chassid. That's oil. He doesn't even know that someone's watching him down, or even knows that he exists. That's part of the shlichus, maybe the ikar shlichus, is to be this example. And that which he's expressing is Bekir of Lamahava, he's expressing himself. And it's B'derech HaMelech. U'kamoi ila va'olo, like ila va'olo. Since the result is comparable to the cause, the cause will naturally produce an effect. When seichel goes through the process of seichel, it's going to stir the heart. If we're going to go through the process of seichel, then we're going to be inspired. That's just a natural result, inspired emotionally. In brackets, this example, since the midah is not it's another world, that's true. But it's be'erech to the seichel. The seichel produce midas. And as we learned in the previous maamar, the midas exist already in the seichel. Hele, mamish, and chachma, like the tzur, and then like somewhat identifiable in bina, like the burning coal. And therefore, it is going to be a isbonenus, but derech hamela naturally. It's not a decision, I'm going to have an emotion. I want to have an emotion. You just have to engage properly in the process of understanding and appreciating chachma, bina, the das. The result is inspired. The result is the heart is moved. It's an integrated system. So the emotion will be born as in accordance with the particular meditation, whether it's going to be an ava or a yira. And likewise, as we said before, the first classic example is Oyren Moed, that the luminary naturally produces light. Since the light is the revelation of the source of light, of the luminary, therefore it's a natural, easy, fluid. That chamela means it's not through effort or involvement or decision. It's the natural consequence that the more it produces light. So it's close. Close means the result is close. It means not some other world, some other universe. Midas are the result, it's another plane of existence, but it's the result of awareness. There cannot be emotion if there isn't awareness in the mind. Can't be. So likewise, there's no oil without moed, and moed will produce oil. We clear? That's kirut. When that which is brought into existence is berichok, what do you say? Then that which is brought into existence is distance from the mahava. It's not the world with the mahava. It's not the natural expression. Like a teacher who has to explain to his students who are not in his world. Can't just give them, pontificate the idea and say it the way he knows it. This can be lost on the kids, on the students. He has to be mislabush b'derech islabshus. So this is hashpa'ah, the classic hashpa'ah, getting involved in the world of the mushpa. Shamahav misasik, there the creator, whatever the mashal is. See other mashalim. Misasik mishtadl lahavis is adavar misave. Here the mahava, the source, has to be involved. Mishtadl means effort, which means it's a decision. It doesn't happen naturally to create that which it produces. There'll be examples here, more simple examples. Big square brackets. The big square brackets to elaborate and explain what we just learned. As is often the case when you learn the Maimon. When he gives an explanation, we thought we got it. But then when he gives the explanation, we really shouldn't grasp it properly. I have a question.
Yeah, I think the Mila happens automatically, but once you bring the still Utsiva when you grow, you still have to make a decision to the Tzava that it should.
Yeah. So the answer is the Tziva is being a Moir. It's Tziva is being a Moir. Then when you grow happens. Good question. Because the Eibush is not a Moir. It's a decision to be a Moir. As we always point out, the whole notion of Oir. As soon as you say Oir, you've already acknowledged there's otherness on some level. And there is no otherness unless God decides to give rise to it. So the whole Oir, we often say the biggest chidush, most radical step in all of Ishtalshalos and in everything, is that there's Oir in itself. That's a bigger, more radical step than the Tzimtzum and everything else in creation, Yashmayim. It's the first radical decision, Oir. What's fascinating is that the early Mukabalim started there. The whole discussion about God starts with Oir in Sof Baruch. Even in Tanya, often speaking about the Eibishter, it's Machusay, Vatzmusay, Ein Sof Baruch. It's only later in Chassidus and in the Rebbe Rasha, particularly in our Rebbe, that there's this Atzmus, complete, clear distinction between the Oir and Moed, Seibev and the Malek. Closer we get to Mashiach, more the curtains on Hashem's face are pulled back, as it were. And Atzmus, the Eibush himself, is laid bare. And then we discover how vulnerable God is chosen to be. Which is the whole point of it. It's quite amazing in retrospect. We, the beneficiaries of the Rebbe's Maimarim, the Rebbe period, like, so how did they possibly understand anything before? What God doesn't care, it's about heaven, reward, and punishment. After it's revealed, it becomes, of course. That's what the pasuk means. Before Chassidus, when the pasuk says God's pleased or angered, chas v'shalom, we're just pretending to motivate us. That's the answer, Lord, in the Svarim of Chakira philosophy. And now, when there was my mother, yeah, angered is upset, hurt. How could Eibush to be upset, hurt? Chose to be. Atzmos chose, and that choice is the deepest expression. That's it. So the pasuk is literal. I mean, that's the paradox. Now the pasuk is literal. Siddur comes. That's the paradox of Siddur. It's ethereal. And wait, pshat. Do you want the pshat? Pshat. Pshat. V'yora reich nechayach and nachasoch lefana. Yeshiv b'shemayim mismach. The Eibush sits in heaven and laughs. Pshat. You want pshat? This is the pshat. Exactly what it says. Or another thing which is astounding. The whole thing is char v'oinish, which is before Chassidus. The whole thing is char v'oinish. How is it that the whole Chumash, not one mention of heaven or hell? It's a very powerful. There are answers, whatever. It's like, the main thing is missing here. Shemaya means the sky. That's what it means in the Chumash. It does not mean heaven. Okay, Medrash, the most basic text Even the Nevi'im, a little bit, they speak about Sheol, and they just brush, just touch it sparingly. But basically, Tanakh and certainly Chumash itself, not one mention of the hereafter, the afterlife. It's all this. So we have to gymnastics to explain this. Long time to see this because this is the Kavanah here. The paradox that it becomes deepest, atmistic explanation, it becomes much simpler in every word and every story. In the macro and in the micro. Okay, let's continue. Yeah? The reason for what? The reason that reason for what? What are we talking about now? The different Eifan Ayisalvos. If it's Memela, it's close. If it's Bislapshus, it's far. Havaya means close, which means that the Bria Ishavos is only Mishem Havaya, we'd feel this closeness. That's not what he wants. He wants us to feel far. Then realize we're not. But to understand this now, that if it's Biderech, Memela, it's close, and Bislapshus, it is far. Explain this further. Tamas are the reason who should be when we speak about the Isavos that come, but it's natural. It's not through even a conscious decision of going to produce something. Just be, the source is what it is, and the results are the results. So then, what's going on here when something is produced? The objective observer, what happened here? The source revealed itself. And this is the result. So when there's a midah, when there's a feeling, what is that a consequence of? A developed seichel. So the hadgosha is the mocker. The mocker is revealed. Like the example we gave before of the chassid that is mere presence, inspires, etc. So the casual observer, watches this whole scene. What's the wow? What's the big wow? That he just, being there, look what he produced. More detail. Therefore, even also where the consequence that comes from the cause is natural and automatic. What's the end result is? The end result is that on the one hand, the result is not the gila of the ilah. The world of midas is not the world of seichel. It's something else. You look at the midah, there's no midah without, what is your grin? What's your appreciation that's brought to this feeling? There cannot be a feeling without it. Likewise, in this example we gave before, how did this change happen? Well, look at him sitting over there. In the midas is felt the seichel. Why the love for this? Because of the appreciation. Or why the awe? Because it's awesome. And where's the appreciation, the awesomeness? In the mind, in seichel. So this is the paradox. On the one hand, you look at the result. It's not a paradox. You look at the result and you see the cause. In order to, that's when something is close. In order to create something which is berichok, that's in a way of investure. And what happens there in contrast? The Indian Islapshus, so when you're invested, it's loisha market misgala. What you're seeing here is not the revelation of the market, but what you're seeing is a mislabish, a misasik, lahavish davachol. She's going out of his world and being involved and engaged to create something novel, something else, which is not his natural world. And therefore, something which is created by the source leaving its world, this is not my world. That which is produced is this, in such a way that the market is not felt. In other words, in the case of the example of the mashpia getting involved, the work's going to be done by the makabel, not being actually inspired. It's not that the aura is changing the whole environment. There's an aura here, and everybody's just lifted by it. But examples like the Fabrengen, the Rebbe's presence, everybody's behaving themselves, right? And everybody's united and achters. That's because the Moed is being galus, and that's it. The consequences. And it's distant. We're in a different world, but we're just the Moed is being galus, as opposed to avoida and change. That Yiheye never gets mislavish in the person's world, which is why it's exhausting for him, even though he doesn't show it, and draining and costs health. And whatever said, first Maamar, taught up his Stephen. So this is from the sins of your youth. That's his lapsus. And that means getting involved in a world that's not the world of the Mashpia. And the change is, the market is not felt. The change is the work that the Makabel has to do, guided by the Mashpia, true, but it's his work. Now, another example, example of where the market is not felt. The classic example of Koyach HaPoel, let's read a bit further. Time that amongst the reasons that the literal translation, that the drawing of the Pu'ula from the Koyach, the result from the Koyach, is not a way of the Koyach is engaged in affecting the result, is because the result, the Pu'ula, the act, is distant from the Koyach. Let's see the words and we'll explain it. The Pu'ula is something novel compared to the force, the power that produces it. Now, the classic example is, he brings in the order 42. Okay, let's read further, we'll get to the order. When he says here Ruchni, we don't mean here Ruchni as in Kedusha. We mean here Ruchni, a force of energy. We mean energy. Energy. Energy is Ruchni. It's not physically tangible. You touch it and hold it. Although it is in our physical world, but relative to Gashmias, which you can touch with the five senses. Vapula, and the result which the energy produces is Gashmias. We tell you right now, the example given in Chassidus it gives in our order is throwing a stone upwards. Stones don't go upwards. Stones, left to their own device, remain grounded by the force of gravity, etc. Now, what's causing the stone to fly? There's an energy that literally wrapped around it. When you throw it, it's called velocity, whatever it is, it gradually dissipates, the stone falls. Depending on the weight, there's an arc. As the force dissipates, or the force spreads, no longer wraps it. No force disappears, it just becomes completely diffused gradually, and the stone falls. So the example here is, as the stone is flying, there is a force that is bearing it aloft, but completely not discernible. Energy can produce anything, not just flying stones. Energy doesn't produce flying stone. It could produce flying stone when directed that way. So therefore, it's not at all seen in the flying stone. You don't see the energy. You see a stone flying. It's berichuk, not bislapshus. It's a davar chodesh agabe the energy. The energy is, of course, begashmis, the person's energy to do it. You can throw a stone. You can do lots of things. Or do nothing. Or do nothing. It's a decision, not unlike Seichel. Seichel will produce the midah. When you really understand something, it's going to stir you one way or another. But koyach doesn't have to be manifest at all. And when it manifests and produces the flying stone, you do not see in the flying stone that physical eye, because you know there's energy, but it's just not apparent. Berichuk. And moreover again, in other words, state this way. If I told you that someone out there just expressed some energy. He, I don't know, even if I'd say he moved his hand, what did he do? He throws something, he takes something, you don't even get to know what he did. Couldn't be anything. It's not bislapshus and in the product. It's berichuk, even though it produces it. Huh?
The real bislapshus. That we try to say the muscle is for rich.
I'm sorry, it's bislapshus, but it's not nicker. Yeah. Okay, we'll revisit this tomorrow. There's Hashem in more detail. Al-Yidei Pul Yodim is going to say, but the Pul itself is not Nirgish HaKoich. Okay, we'll see the distinctions.